Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy reporting from my little cabin in the woods, Murphy's Law. And I'm very excited tonight because we have an author on. Her name is Nola Nash, and she's got this wonderful new series of books set all down in New Orleans. So I'm very excited that she's here tonight to talk about her books. Do I have it upside down? Have it upside down.
There you go.
Showing them, but so that's just the way my day's been going. But welcome, Nola. I'm going to now put this on speaker view. So I'm going to have you just tell a little bit about yourself, tell a little bit about your books, and then I'll jump in and with the interview. But let's just give an overview because this is being recorded. And it's going to be up on my Kathy L. Murphy YouTube channel so that everybody can watch it at their own leisure that miss it tonight. But I want everybody to kind of know your backstory. So I'm going to let you begin. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm Nola Nash. I am originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and now I live in Tennessee. I live in Brentwood, which is the suburb of a very precious historic town called Franklin, Tennessee. And Kathy, we have got an antique shop here in Franklin that has more tiaras than you can possibly imagine. Every time I go in there to look for something else, I always pass the tiaras and I think of you. My children have to talk me out of the fact that I really don't need this many tiaras, but I must have it. So awesome. They're gorgeous. And if you're ever in this area, we are going to the Ice House to go look at tiaras. They've got you covered. But I love living in Franklin, but I do miss living in South Louisiana because New Orleans is where my soul really lives. Growing up down there, you have an appreciation for history, magic, mystery, all things kind of dark and spooky, but at the same time, they know how to party. And we, of course, have great food and great music down there. So I love being down there, and I try to go back as often as I can. But when I am here in Tennessee, I am an instructional coach. I was an English teacher. I am now an instructional coach for our online high school. So I teach teachers now as opposed to teaching students. And I'm really excited about working with the teachers and helping them learn the technology and just best practices. So I'm really excited about that. So that is what is coming down the pipe for me as far as personal stuff. So I'm enjoying somewhat of a summer. Got lots of new things I have to learn as teachers do over the summer, but I'm also working on some writing. I'm actually working on the third book in the Crescent City series. So I'm working on Crescent City Soul right now. Really enjoying that. So kind of finally got the wheels spinning underneath that one. I'm also working on a book about the 1811 German coast slave uprising. And the German coast is the area of the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And there was a slave uprising that happened there in 1811 that was basically obliterated from history. So fragments of the history have come to light. And so I'm working on an historical fiction about that uprising, told basically from four perspectives, from four of the key players in that story. And the book that Grace has been so gracefully and gratefully reading for me is Traveler. Traveler is coming out in March. So I'm excited about Traveler. It is a modern day, it's a fantasy, but we've got a whole lot of romance. We've got a little splash of paranormal. We've got some historical lessons in there, and the fact that our heroine is pulled back into memories of her past lives, and she has to learn from her past lives, as well as those around her, to help her find the destiny she was supposed to be born for. She was born in the wrong time and the wrong place, and so she has to find her way back to the time and the place where she belongs. So that is Traveler, but the Crescent City series is a paranormal mystery series set in 1830s New Orleans. So we've got some interesting things going on there. And one of my favorite villains I've ever had the chance to write, Selene. And Selene is just nasty. There is no redeeming quality about her whatsoever. And she is so much fun to write. And she's just She's a play on all things Gothic horror, things that, as an English teacher, I always loved to teach as far as suspense and horror. Huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. And I love how he tends to play on human instinct and human fear and the things that we can't see coming. How do you brace for a danger you can't see? And that's where the idea for Selene came, because they have to fight an enemy they can't see, who can kill on a whim, and who's basically just taunting Zaley, our main character, as she's trying to figure out what to do about this evil villain who is basically finding a way to murder everyone that she cares about. So she has to stop her before she actually takes everyone she loves. So it's an adventure, it's a mystery, there's a little bit of romance in there, and a whole lot of New Orleans magic and voodoo, because another fun thing for me is to take what is traditionally thought of as a bad guy and make them a good guy. So one of our heroes of the story is actually a voodoo priestess. So it's fun to take that preconception about voodoo and what all it stands for and actually put it out there as it was meant to be, a protection and healing practice, which is what the character in my book does. So that's me in the series, everything that's kind of coming up.
Well, my big question is, where does this all come from? I mean, where does this interest come from is it just living there that you fell in love with it? Was there something that you decided that one day I'm going to write this type? What made you write this type of a book?
I think it came from walking around in the city of New Orleans, and so many of the buildings that are standing there are 200-300 years old, and they haven't changed. I mean, ultimately, you can walk around on, hardwood floors that are cypress floors that have simply just had a new coat of wax on them, but they were the original floors in the house, things like that. And the stories that the city could tell and that the walls could, if those walls could talk is so thick when you walk around that city, because you're surrounded in almost a time capsule. And so different owners, different people, different stories of these people kind of weaving together in actually what is a very small area of New Orleans. When you talk about New Orleans, it's a big city, but everybody focuses in on the French Quarter, and that there's a reason for that. It's so colorful and so vibrant, so full of life, and full of that deep-rooted history. And so it's playing with all of those things that I loved about the French Quarter, so that I could actually tell those stories kind of as I've imagined them to be, and all of this intertwining. And another interesting thing about New Orleans is that voodoo and the Catholic Church actually were not at odds with one another. They played nicely together, actually, in a certain time period. Actually, not when the Spanish were in charge of New Orleans, but when the French were. They actually allowed the practice of voodoo, but a whole lot of voodoo practitioners would also be devout Catholics, including our famous voodoo priestess, Marie Laveau. She was a very devout Catholic. And so a lot of people don't really understand how those two things play together. And so those collide in the Crescent City series, because we have our voodoo priestess, who's one of our main characters, who's a good guy, but she is also brought into the story and works very closely with the Ursuline nuns. And so there's a whole lot going on in a lot of kind of odd combinations, this kind of magical menagerie that Zaley has working with her. She also has her grandmother's spirit, who is helping her to defeat Selene, who is her mother, who is a witch, and witch gone bad. Camille, the grandmother, was a witch, but Selene has gone bad. And so all of these various people have come together to kind of take back the French Quarter from this murderous maniac. And it's a very interesting combination. She also has the help of a very handsome police officer that, you got to throw one of those in for good measure, right?
Right. Well,
and Louis is a really great character. He's a lot of fun too, because he's the rational voice. He doesn't believe any of this nonsense at first. He's kind of like, okay, yeah, but there's got to be a rational explanation for this. And the deeper he gets pulled into, the more he has to let that go.
If you've ever been to New Orleans, you totally get your books, because, I have gone down there for Mid-South Bookselling Convention, for the Tennessee Williams Bookselling Convention, the William Faulkner Literary Festival. And I am in love with New Orleans because it doesn't matter where you are in the quarter or in the outskirts or whatever, the stories are playing out every day. I could write lots of stories about some of the things I've seen down there, and some of my favorite authors have written books that live there or are set there, including Robert Hicks, who's lived just down the road from you in Leaper's Fork.
I was in Leaper's Fork this past weekend.
I love Leaper's Fork. If I could live anywhere, that's my kind of town, because it's very small, but it's very artsy. And
we were eating dinner at Puckett's.
Oh, you love it. I love it, and they have a great bookstore there, all the signed books. And it's amazing. When I would stay with Robert, he lives in a 1700s restored log cabin. He also was voted Tennessean of the Year for his, he's been in charge of restoring the Battle of Franklin battlefield, Civil War battlefield. I've gone and seen all those places and the churches and things. So I know exactly where you're at. I don't know where the store is with the tiaras, but I will be going back. But it's a fascinating area, both the places that you live and the place that you're writing about, because to me, place is such a part of the story. So, setting a story in New Orleans is already a win-win, because it is magical, and it has, everybody's gone to the Marie Laveau's House of Voodoo. If you haven't been to New Orleans, and then the cemetery tours and the ghost walks and all that. So I am thrilled to hear that you've got another book coming out in the series. I want to check out this Travelers. It sounds very interesting too. And that's going to be out in March of 2021.
Coming out in March from Black Rose Publishing. And it is the first in a 3-book series. The second is already written. So it is Travelers book 1, Watcher is book 2, and Oracle will be book 3. And Grace is over there going, yeah, okay, I know where we're going with this.
What's your discipline? What's the process in that you're writing? How do you get this? How do you get all of this down and so much? That's very interesting to me.
Well, I'm blessed to have a teacher's schedule, and so I use my holidays. Anytime that we're on a break, that's my writing time. I have certain days that are family days and things like that, but anytime I have a break, whether it's our 2-week holiday for winter break or summer, it's those, there are a certain amount of days that I will designate as writing days. A lot of times too, it's sort of how I decompress after a long day. Writing to me is my way to control things that it's my space to control something when I have no control over anything else. I can actually decide what these people are going to do, to say, to wear, to eat. And nothing else in my life is in my control. I mean, I'm a mom of 3 kids. I've got, all these students out there and everything that they've got going on, teachers, bosses, all of this. But I can control that world. And so when everything else is just kind of spinning around me, that's my way to kind of pull it in and find my center again and just be grounded again, because I can control that. And so I kind of find that inner peace in that world. Even if that world is Gothic horror, it's still something that I can control.
And can I just hop in there? Before I became a novelist, I spent 30 years in education working with people like Nola, who taught kids and then taught teachers. It is the most exhausting job in America. You start at oh dark 100. People think, the school bell rings, you're done at 3. You are not. And for the attention that Nola plays in her book, many of us here have written. But there is no way, as much as I could tell you I love what I write, there is nothing like the level of detail that Nola writes about a place. Kathy, you mentioned a feel for a place, which is so important. Nola pulls something off the page, which means in my mind, at least, Nola, you've done like 75 hours worth of research to say,
Yes.
and then the light came through from the Northeast and did this. So I have no idea how you have the energy to do this. I'm totally in awe.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was a history and English double major in college. And so the research that goes into writing historical fiction is actually almost, it could almost be detrimental to me because I'm very addicted to it. And I can go down so many rabbit holes. Yeah. But allowing myself some freedom to do that, I find some really interesting things. And it's those little nuggets, those little gems of kind of those obscure facts that get worked in that give so much authenticity to the setting that I've chosen and just the atmosphere. One of the words that I love that comes up in a whole lot of the reviews about this series is atmospheric. And that's exactly what I'm going for here. Because if I've not immersed my reader in old New Orleans, I've not done my job. Because to me, the city itself is alive. That city has a soul. It pulses. And it's a character in the book as much as anybody else that I've created as, you know, just the people moving about in New Orleans. But it is New Orleans that holds it all together and really honestly steers everything that's going on. And I've always seen that city as alive and down at its core. And because of that, it becomes very easy for me to do the research. It fascinates me. And over time, I've accumulated a lot of information about the city. And so sometimes, you know, I get to a certain point where it's just kind of my knowledge base that I'm drawing from my own experiences of walking around in a city that hasn't changed in 300 years. And so you can pull that out. But then there are things that, you know, I do have to research. I had to make sure there was one detail that almost slipped through in Crescent City Moon. I had a kerosene lamp. Kerosene was not used yet in 1830s. It was not used in New Orleans until 1850. And so I had to back it up. It was a whale oil lamp. And so I had to go from kerosene. It was just changing a word. I couldn't say kerosene lamp hanging on the front of the carriage. I had to say that it was an oil lamp hanging on the front of the carriage. But I didn't want anyone calling me out on that historical detail that I had missed. So getting the history right is critical to me. I don't want anyone distracted by historical inaccuracies that they cannot appreciate the fiction that's woven through it.
That's fascinating. That's really great. Well, you know, the characters in your book, and we get into all these different characters, there are so many tours in New Orleans that, you know, you can go to that tell you the stories, and Preservation Hall where you can go hear the music and all the different things, and the cemetery tours. Have you ever thought about doing a gosh, where did I put the books? A Crescent City tour?
Oh, I'd love to, because so many places that are in that book are still there. And
I would contact the Tennessee Williams, is now melded with the William Faulkner, and say, hey, listen, I'd love to come for my next book, and perhaps I could offer a walking tour of, you know, highlights of some of the places where I think that would be fascinating.
It would be a whole lot of fun. Nothing to me is more fun than just walking up and down the streets in the quarter. And so you would do that? That would be cool. I would love to do that. I mean, as a history major, somebody who loves history so much, and I was a theater kid, so talking in front of a group and telling these crazy stories, I mean, I love doing that. So I would absolutely do a walking tour that goes with this. And there are still so many places that this book, you know, one of the things people love about it is they're going, I've been there, I've seen that, I know what she's talking about. And that's fun for me when people can make that connection in a book that's set in 1830 for a trip that they took in 2010, and it's still there. So it's a lot of fun for me.
True, because Robert Hicks' book goes even back further than that, when he talks about the Civil War General Hood, and in his stories, his Civil War stories, and set in New Orleans, and when they had all those, I think it was diphtheria was the plague that kind of hit the city, and people were dying left and right. But there, all those places where are still there. So it would be fascinating to do. And Tawana and I, who was my executive director, we used to go to the Tennessee Williams. It's a fun event because at the end of it, they have a Stella yelling contest.
They do at the house, because I know where his house is. It's right at the end of Pirates Alley, and so you're standing right there at his house.
They do it there on the square, and it's Jackson Square, and it's just
Mhm.
packed with people. And to experience that, and I took Margie, one of my pulpit queens, with me, and my daughter, who'd never been to New Orleans, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!" But hopefully by next year, maybe they'll have that open again where we can.
That'd be wonderful.
Online, yeah,
I would love to do it.
That'd be great. And so, on this next series of books that you're doing, the location is where of the traveler?
Everywhere. I mean, she is truly going on an adventure. We start in Jamaica. She then gets sent to Rome. We go to Spain. We go to Egypt. We go to Malta. We go to Greece. I feel like I'm leaving something out. France. She's in Paris.
England and France.
Yes. So she's everywhere. She has to go. She is at the very beginning. We find her at the end of an assignment. She's a travel writer, and she's working for Pioneer Tours, and her boss insists on authentic experiences. If she's going to write promotional material, she must have the authentic experience. Well, she's really jaded. I always compare her to, if Anthony Bourdain was a 20-something chick, that's Shelby Starling.
Wow.
Jaded, often solving problems with a bottle of Chianti, just escaping life and not wanting to face things, never feeling really at home anywhere. But she's writing promotional material, and her boss sends her these places she doesn't really appreciate because it's a job. And so she is sent from her last assignment in Ocho Rios, Jamaica, to start writing new promotional material for their new Magical History tour line. And so it is because she is sent then to Rome, where she discovers this particular connection that she has with history, and the fact that she is in the wrong time and place, and that history it's got a bone to pick with her. It wants her back, whether she wants to go or not. And so it kind of takes her kicking and screaming on this adventure to find out who she really is. And the whole time she's going, I'm not a Destiny kind of girl. Like, that's not me. And Destiny says, well, maybe not yet, but you've got some things to learn, and maybe you'll change your mind. Well, Egypt. We go to Egypt too. I say that.
You'll have to get with Stephanie Chance, because she does the Decorate Ornate tours to Europe and Italy and these places you're talking about. And in fact, when this opens back up, there's nothing more in the world I want to do is take my authors and my book club members back on one of Stephanie's tours, and perhaps we could even see maybe some of those places that are set in your book. So that's
absolutely. Rome is one of my favorite cities. I mean, I've been to Jamaica, I've been to Ocho Rios, I've been to, and I try to pull in real places when I do this. Again, it's the research, and it's all of these things. It's, she's climbing Dunn's River Falls. She's, drinking a red, she's got her Jamaican beer at the top of the falls, finally deciding that's the thing to do. She goes ocean kayaking. I did those things. Like, I've done all those things that I did in Jamaica. But Rome is one of those cities that it's kind of like New Orleans. It has that soul that I love that just runs real deep. And I just loved Rome. I love just wandering Rome. And so I've pulled a lot of the things that I was passionate about when I got to see Rome, and some places that are real places that maybe are not as, common on some tours that people can go explore. And the library that she goes into, and the books that were there that are, that I mentioned in the book, are in that library. Like, there's incredible things that you can actually see, these illuminated manuscripts and things just in the library down the street in Rome. And I love that, the history that is just so thick there. And then this crazy, wild, modern life and traffic, and the women in their stiletto heels and A-line skirts riding on mopeds down the middle of the street. I mean, it's great. I love the life over there. And I would love to actually be part of one of those trips because I'd give anything to go back to Rome. I really would.
Well, Stephanie goes off the beaten path, and she has the history that she does. In fact, her last book was just chock full of history, her Mamma Mia series. So you guys need to get together. You need to get together. That'd be great. And I know Mandy loves New Orleans as much as I do. So Mandy, Tennessee Williams, 2022, whoever else wants to come, I know a great place to stay. And they always have it at the Hotel Monteleone, which has the revolving carousel bar, which is a story in itself,
I love the rooms that the Hotel Monteleone has. And they've got, rooms that are actually named after different authors. And the 14th floor is haunted. I love the Hotel Monteleone. There's some great places that you can stay in New Orleans that are very convenient and very unique and interesting. Talk about a place full of beautiful boutique hotels and some really old places with lots of stories. But the Carousel Bar, you gotta go to the Carousel Bar. You can't miss that.
Yes, it's just, and you can sit there and you can just see a story walking by every minute. Mm-hmm. It's fun. So I'm very excited. I'm going to open this up to all of you to ask any burning questions or any comments on the series. And it might even be just that, your experience of being in New Orleans. And if you were going to go, these would be great books to read. So anybody want to speak up and who's been there and any questions you might have?
I'll go. So Nola and I have never met, as many of us in this Facebook world have not. And I would say that one of the most interesting things for me in becoming more involved in this community is that I read things that I would have never read before.
Exactly.
And if somebody had said to me, so you want to read this thing about this woman who travels through time, she puts her hand on a wall and zap, now she's in Greece and zap, I would be absolutely not. And what I'm humbled about and surprised about is how many different genres I now love, enjoy, want to find out more about. So Nola, as a teacher, you can see that you love the teaching art. And I love that about what I've read of your work. But how do we communicate, how do you communicate as an author that this is a genre, because it is a little bit for me, just for me, because I'm old, off the beaten path. I haven't read fantasy, and I don't know if that's where you would qualify your work or historical.
It's really hard. It's hard to pigeonhole this one. It's really tough.
So how do we, as people in Kathy's wonderful community, say, you should try that?
A lot of it has to do with reviews and word of mouth more than anything. And, a lot of times, my post today was talking about reviews and how important they are. And just that idea of the feeling the book gives you. And it's okay in a review to say, this was a new genre for me. And now I want to read more of this genre. I've never really thought that paranormal was my thing or fantasy was my thing. And I think a lot of the responsibility for broadening horizons with students comes from their teachers. And if we are open as teachers to reading different genres, then we can recommend different books for different kids. And it comes down to if you give them time in class to read a book, then they're seeing what their peers are reading. And sometimes those conversations start on their own and say, what is that? That looks really interesting. Oh, this is my favorite book. I'm on the fourth one in the series. Really? What's it about? And you let those conversations happen. And sometimes the same thing that happens in the reading community is somebody will post a review about something in a book club group. And you can admittedly say, this was not something I really ever thought I was going to read. But guys, there is something in this for everyone. And, I picked it up because of this reason, but I love it now because of this. And just knowing that it is okay to branch out. Maybe you don't like everyone in that genre. There's a whole lot of horror I'm not going to read. I'm very much a gothic horror person, not a I'm not a huge Stephen King reader. I don't like modern horror. I like historical horror. And so that's my thing. But if I had not been open to reading things like Edgar Allan Poe and some of our other classic horror writers, then if I hadn't been exposed to that, generally by a teacher, then I wouldn't have known that I liked it. Because I grew up reading Georgette Heyer romances. They're historical romances, these Victorian romance things. Everything is lovely. There's Sylvester with his eyebrow that always goes. I love Sylvester. There's some great, I still remember these people. There's some great books like that. But had it not been for English teachers that were exposing me to lots of variety, then I probably would have stayed in that one little niche. But I was lucky to have that. And I think the more that we share what we're reading and what we love about those books, and it's not so much a synopsis of the book when you're giving a review or you're posting comments about it. It's what did you take away from it as an emotion, as a feeling, as a particular thing about it that really stuck with you that you just kind of can't shake now that you've even had to close the book, not being able to wait on the sequel because now it's like, I've got to find out what happened. All of those things are great things to share with people that will help them to see there's more to this world than maybe the one little genre that I read. If I'm used to reading Hallmark romance novels, I may not think that I'm going to like something like the Crescent City series, but all through this book is actually a really great love story. All the way through Traveler is a great love story. It's an unexpected love story. And so there are still elements of that, but the rest of the fantasy and the darkness and that Gothic horror is still surrounding that, but there is still that thread. So there's lots of levels to a book. If we just simply say, I don't like that genre, well, we're not really being fair to the genre because it's too much variety within a genre to really just dismiss it offhand.
Well, and I think that, you give credit to your fellow teachers, which is beautiful. But I also think it speaks to your authenticity when you talked earlier about not wanting the history to pull us out. So having that right. There's an author that I never would have read named D.C. Gomez, and she has a cat that is from Egypt and talks. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be working for me. And I was totally in love with the book. So now I think the biggest gift for me for places like Kathy L. Murphy's work is that we have so many different genres that we get introduced to. So thank you for that.
I just want to interject one thing too, is, if it wasn't for my teachers and librarians, I would not have this wealth of knowledge about other cultures and other peoples and other worlds. And growing up in Kansas, it's a very small place. It wasn't very worldly, but I had teachers who traveled abroad and introduced foods and languages and all types of stories. I think we tend to try to put people in boxes. Oh, she's a romance reader. She's a Southern Gothic reader. She's a mystery reader. When in fact, all we really want is a great story. And, Johnny Bernhard came up with the line in our wonderful book, The Pulpit Queen Celebrates 20 Years. It's all about the story. That's what it is, folks. If you've got a great story to tell, it doesn't matter what genre or what box you might want to file it in. I honestly wish we'd just get rid of the boxes, because I think, people say to me, well, they, always poo-poo romance books. But I'm telling you, I am a true romantic. And if there is an epic love story in it, and a good example is Outlander. I did not want to see that. I did not want to read those books. And then my sister got me started on it, and I got so hooked on the love stories and the time travel, and totally outside of my genre. I think it's all about the story. And I think that's what we're all doing. And wonderfully, Mandy came up with the idea, Mandy Haynes, who's here, came up with the idea of while we're waiting for those new books to come out, why don't we do another anthology of showcasing all the different stories that our authors write? And we've got 9, you'll have soon 10 with my story that I'm putting into the book. But then you get a taste of all the different types of authors, whether they're stateside or mystery or global or diverse. We want people to know it's really the story. So Nola's got some great stories, as so do all the authors that are here today. And I think the more that we read and share and support each other, I'm really working hard on trying to get all of our authors on board and all of our book club members on board in the conversation, because nobody really understands what happens at these book club meetings unless you come.
Right.
It's kind of like, oh, I think I know what the book's about, but I haven't read it. You have to participate. You have to read. You have to talk about it. And then all these truths come forward, and these new revelations of, oh my gosh, I was totally wrong about that place. And so thank you for everybody who researches their historical novels or even their nonfiction. Like Stephanie does tremendous research on her books. And now that I've got my art history minor degree, I'm trying to make sure everything's right. And Mandy keeps me on point on that too, because she's a wonderful editor. But you guys, we've got a great opportunity to, get more stories into our book. You have to be a Pulpwood Queen author to get in the book, but this is an opportunity for you to get out into a bigger world. I love short stories because I love to read. In fact, I would suggest to all of you as a marketing ploy to read excerpts from your books or put snippets of your up and coming novel on the website. I mean, Robert Waltney's been doing that. And I think it gives people, just like on the Breathless Bubbles and Books, I watch as people listen, and then they start jumping in the conversation, and then they start talking about the stories of reviews like you did today, Nola. I see people, the little connections are being made. But the bigger picture is eventually we're all going to get back together in person. We're still going to be doing the online because that's the only way we can get the people from around the world on board. But thank you, Nola. And so this summer, your books don't seem to me like an early morning type of writing procedure. Do you write what time of day do you write your books?
Here's my writing process. You're going to laugh because it makes no sense. It really doesn't. I'm a moody writer, and I think that's why I have so many different things. I have a third series that I didn't even talk about that is actually set, it's a historical fiction romance series that is set in 1850s New Orleans. It's actually funny, sassy, more along the Georgette Heyer kind of. I went back to my Georgette Heyer roots for that one. So I have the Travelers series, which is a little more modern, kind of sassy, but a little different than the gothic horror of the Crescent City series, or even just kind of the sass and circumstance of the Sylvie series. So I write with whatever mood I'm in. But I tend to write better at Starbucks. The people there know my name. It's like they know. So I will go and sit at Starbucks for a few hours, and I'll just like knock a chapter out. Sometimes a little more than that. Drinking my grande non-fat caramel latte. They all know my order too. Sometimes I go to a venti if I feel like I'm going to be there a while. But one of the things, if I'm going to write at home, I have to put on reggae music. I know that's so weird, but every book that is already finished has been written with Bob Marley in the background.
Really?
It seems so strange for this gothic horror. You'd think I'd have this really moody music on and stuff. But reggae music, I can't understand the words they're saying half the time. And so it doesn't I don't start singing it in my head, but it's got this rhythm that just kind of keeps me going. And it's usually a pretty similar rhythm, no matter what the song is. And so it's just this background track that kind of keeps me focused and keeps me doing what I need to do. And I think it also helps me from getting kind of mired in, because some of these scenes in this book, they're very dark. I mean, there's some things that, when you're pouring your emotions into them, and it's hard for people to really get what authors go through when they're sitting there then doing a scene like that. Something that is, if I'm describing yesterday, I really was having a lot taken out of me because I'm describing in pretty graphic detail a crime scene. And so in order for me to get my readers to see this, I'm having to focus on detail. So in my head, I'm there. And I mean, you'll read the scene in probably 20 minutes, but for me, it was a couple of hours, sitting there and refining that and really deciding what I wanted to put in it takes a lot out of you. And so sometimes having that kind of happier music in the background keeps you from really getting sucked in emotionally by your own writing. And it can trap you. I mean, you can get, just like you do when you're reading a book. I mean, your mood will shift based on what the characters are going through, and you get emotionally attached and you get pulled in. Think about actually sitting there writing all of those details about those things. And it's not just the scene, it's how other people are reacting emotionally to that scene, what they're thinking about that they are observing. And so you're in all these different people's heads looking at this scene, this horrible, murder scene. And you've got to write that. And it's not always easy to do. I mean, even though I like writing Gothic horror, it's definitely something that can take an emotional toll. So I think the reggae music kind of keeps me from just really spiraling downwards. And it makes it a whole lot easier to kind of go.
Like a shield.
Yeah, it is. It's like my little shield of light. It's like, okay, happy beach music. It's like, okay, listen to the happy beach music.
Would you say
I think it's so funny that Nola, that I lived in Tennessee and worked in a satellite clinic right where you are, and we never met until I was in Florida.
I know, it's like so sad. We could have been like buddies hanging out.
But would you say that when you're an author, you get to live many lives other than your own? And I also believe that if you don't read, you're living one life. But if you read, you're not only living multiple lives, you're getting to travel the world. That's why I think reading is probably one of the most important things that we can learn when we're in school. Because if a child can learn how to read well by the time they're in third grade, they've got the tools to educate themselves their entire lives. But if they miss that connection, then they're handicapped in a lot of ways. So good thing for teachers and teachers teaching teachers. And that's an interesting, I just read today that Johnny Bernhard is going to New York to be working with educators in the arts. I'm so excited for her for this, but we have so many of our book club members that are teachers, retired teachers, educators, retired, they get it. They know that reading's important. So thank you for sharing all those wonderful things. What is the most unique thing since you've started writing that you've discovered that you never knew before you became a writer? Can you think of one thing in particular?
The most unique thing is how much authors are responsible for their own marketing.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Because
I think we don't know, readers don't necessarily know how much of that is on the author. And authors don't know how much that's on the authors until they get out there and have to kind of discover that. That's my biggest surprise in the publishing world, I guess, more than anything else. I've learned a lot of really interesting things through my historical research, but just about the writing business itself is how much of that is actually falling on the authors these days. And a lot of it has to do with, the big publishing houses being, so few now and so selective, and all these smaller presses. And thank God for those smaller presses that are giving more voices and opportunity, but they also don't have the financial weight behind them to really push the authors the way that they would like to. And so you have to really be willing to get in and learn the marketing as well as your own craft. And it becomes like two different jobs. You want to keep writing for your readers, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time and effort and money on the author's parts to actually get out there. I had teachers and students when I published the first Crescent City book. So many of my teacher friends said, "So are you going to quit now?" I said, "I didn't win the lottery. I published a book." So, yeah, I'm going to be here tomorrow. Okay. So there's a misconception, I think, about about what authors make on their work and what authors actually spend on getting their work out there. And sometimes it's largely disproportionate.
That's the point right there, because for 21 years, I've been doing this, for just the love of books and authors and everything. And now with COVID, not being able to get out and work, it's my livelihood too. And so I work 24/7 on trying to keep everybody connected, and I think a lot of times if everything's was always given to you for free before, people expect it to be free forever, but we're not in that world anymore. It's everything costs and everything's going up. So you brought up a really good point, and it's hard to navigate the publishing and marketing, but I will tell you for a fact that even the biggest authors in the country are now having to hire their own editors. They're having to hire their own people for so much of the work. It used to be if you got published by one of the big houses, they did it for you. I was published by one of the big houses with my book, and I put my entire book tour together. They said, we're going to send you to seven states and, 7 stores on tour. And I showed them, I said, well, if you're going to send me to 7 states, you can really utilize that if you would I could do more than one event in one day. And I ended up doing 27 stops in 10 states. And I was gone a month and a half. But I put it all together for them, and it cost them the same as I've done flying me to each state.
Right.
It's just a waste. And a lot of times you're backtracking. And I go, if you know your territory, you know where to go. And that's what, take notes, people. When you go out, remember the places that supported you, and go back. And Mandy and I are here to help you all the way with our Reading Nation magazine. I mean, you guys, when you see this next issue, oh my God, Mandy.
She does such a great job. It is gorgeous.
It's actually, and when I think about when I started out, there was Book Magazine, Publishers Weekly, there were all these wonderful magazines out there. For now, it's, Lone Star Literary is the only thing we've got going here in Texas. And I'm now advertising all of you in it just to keep that magazine going, because they're struggling. Everybody's struggling. So what we've got to do in these tough times is recognize that the more we help each other get more people on board, the more we're helping ourselves. And so I can't thank all the authors and everybody who show up week after week and go on to the Breathless Bubbles and Books. And if you're on Breathless Bubbles and Books, be sure and do the people after you. Jump on board and say, hey, I've been there. I know what happens now. I want to support you. You supported me. The more we help each other. And our Girlfriend Weekend this year, we're actually going to call it the International Book Club Convention, because we are the only one in the world. We're the only book club convention. I don't even know of one in the States. And so we want that to be known. And it's going to be a week long. We're going to have 100 authors. We're building our everybody's wanting to come on board. And we're doing everything we can. Robert Waltney and Paul Roberson, my webmaster, and Mandy and I, we're doing everything we can so that when we do get back out in the world, we've got this infrastructure set up. And we want everybody to share everybody. If we're all promoting reading, that's all I care about. I'm not on a personal agenda for the Pulpwood Queens. I did this because reading saved my life, and it will save others too. And every book that you write is touching someone in a way that they're either going, I can do this, or I could be an author, or, maybe I could work in publishing. Maybe I want to go travel to that place. It's ripples in the pond that's going out. And so the more with our writers club and our book and film club, and we're soon going to be starting our talk show, which we're going to feature all our authors. Very excited about that. And I've got some pretty exciting news about that. But the magazine's coming out soon. Any other comments for Nola on her taking time out of her busy schedule? She's got some great blogs coming up, and we give you all week. This is a way to get your books and your story out there, and you can go through Sunday. And but that's totally up to you. We know our weekends are precious, but we just cannot tell you how thankful we are that you came into our view. And I'm counting on that trip when we go back to the Tennessee Williams, when we're able to go back again, that I can go on that walking tour with you. What a fun night that would be.
Wouldn't it be fun? I would love to do it and just go to all of my favorite places. Hopefully, Lafayette Cemetery is one of my favorite in the Garden
I've
District.
never been on a cemetery tour because
The covers of the books are actually, if I can get the glare off of them, are actually photographs that I took of Lafayette Cemetery. And so I love having my own photography up there. Our graphics guy did some tweaking to them and darkened them and spookied them a little bit. But one of my favorite things is actually taking photographs of cemeteries. I love that. The stories that the monuments down in New Orleans, the above ground cemeteries can tell are fascinating too. But yeah, that's another place to go is Lafayette Cemetery.
Do you feel frightened when you go there? Because I've heard so many stories about people that actually, homeless people that live there, that rob people that go to
They've fixed a lot of that problem, which is really good. St. Louis Cemetery #1, which is actually right behind the French Quarter where Marie Laveau is buried. Nick Cage has a pyramid there. Women with red lipstick on kiss it. I don't know what the point is, but that's what they do. So it's this big white pyramid. It says Nicolas Cage. Of course, he's not dead, but there's his thing waiting for him, and there's always red lipstick prints on it. But that cemetery is now actually managed by the Historical Society. And so you have to have guided tours to go in. So it's prevented a lot of that, and it's gated. And Lafayette Cemetery is gated as well. It's free to go in Lafayette Cemetery because it's in the Garden District. You really don't have the same kind of issues that they had in Lafayette, which was so close to the quarter. So I love Lafayette just because you can really just kind of walk around. It's actually more of a Protestant cemetery because it was more the American side. Down in the Garden District was where the Americans kind of moved in after the Louisiana Purchase, whereas St. Louis is more French. But it's a beautiful place to just wander. Just the sculpture of those tombs are just spectacular. But to me, it's more like a small, they call them the cities of the dead. And so to me, it's more like a city. And it's these different families that lived there, and they have their families with them and how they connect to these families over there. And, in New Orleans, the tradition is that the spirits don't haunt the cemetery. They haunt where they died. And so cemeteries are actually, to me, a very peaceful place with that mentality. It's where they go to rest. And so you can find their stories that they want to tell just by proximity to the family that they're there with, and friends that maybe they were with during their life. But it's the actual creepier places are where they died. And so many stories. I always say that there's more dead walking the streets of New Orleans than there are living. And so if you kind of pause for a moment, you can just get that feeling that you're not alone walking down that sidewalk. There's always someone else with you.
I can remember going around a mountainous curve on the Amalfi Coast and Stephanie screaming, "Stop, slow down, look." And there's a cemetery built up the side of this sheer cliff. And we had to stop this giant bus on this little bitty road. So I go, how do they even bury him? I think they pull him up by ropes or something.
We drive up to the top. It's a spindle top, and it's the cemetery of Positano.
Oh, Positano is so cool. I love Positano.
And how many of you, when you were kids, now this tells something on me. Me and my sisters and my friends would take bike hikes and have picnics at the cemetery.
I still do that.
Did you do that? I still do that.
I do.
It's very beautiful, and you do the rubbings with the, pencil on paper. It's just a lot of fun. Ooh, look at my cat in the background yawning.
The eyes start to glow. My grandmother actually was the one that kind of gave me my love of cemeteries, because she was the one who basically introduced me to the concept of the cemetery as a storybook. And if you look closely, you can see the family history written in the tombstones. The babies that were buried next to the parents, the babies died early. And so what was happening in history at that time, what might have caused that baby's death, and, different stories that the tombstones themselves could tell. And so because I always saw it as a storybook, it never held that kind of creepiness to me. I always felt like I was visiting someone else's family, as opposed to there's dead people there and bones, and it never had that sense to me. I absolutely love any haunted place, though. I have had more than one experience with things like that, where I will tell you, I firmly believe those things. And so, call me crazy if you want to, but that's, once you've had a real enough experience with things like that, more than one, you start to kind of realize that if you're open to it, those kinds of things are everywhere. And not all those spirits are necessarily, they're not bad. A lot of the spirits we come in contact with are just like the people we come in contact with, the living we come in contact with. They want to be noticed. They want to be remembered. And maybe they have something to say too. And a lot of times that's really all it is. I imagine a whole lot of them are lost and confused, don't know how they got there, don't know why they're there. And so I feel a bit more sympathetic, I think, to them than anything else. It's, how would I feel if suddenly, if I was killed suddenly and here I am and I don't realize I'm dead? I mean, one of the La Pavillon, one of the hotels in New Orleans, there's apparently a ghost who died in a carriage accident. She was on her way to the harbor and to go catch a steamship. She was going to London, but she died on the way. And her ghost continually tries to catch a ride to catch a boat. And she still does. She will flag down a cab dressed in her 1800s garb, but she actually tells the patrons she's dressed like this. They all, patrons think that she's a reenactor, but she's real enough that she will bump into them and say, "Excuse me," and tell them, "Can you help me? I'm lost." And I just feel my heart breaks for her.
There now. That sounds like fun. That sounds very interesting.
There's so many stories like that where I feel like, your heart goes out to these spirits that are just lost and wandering, and you want so badly for them to find that peace that they are just grasping for. And so, yes, just like living people, there are bad spirits too. I have a friend of mine who's a medium who helps me with a lot of my research, and the seance that's in Crescent City Moon. We had the seance, so that anything that's in here that's magical or voodoo, anything like that, I've done it, because I don't feel like you can write about these things if you haven't done it. And so I've carved candles, I've done all these things. But she has a way of putting it. She says, there are nice living people and there are horrible living people. And so people are not going to change who they are just because they die. And I thought, that's the way to look at it. I mean, if you think about it, there are more nice people usually that you come in contact with than horrible people. So if they're dead, odds are there's more nice people dead than there are horrible people. So I kind of take her word of caution with that about, they're the same people. They're just dead. And so
thing too about Louisiana too. I don't know what it is, but I was telling Mandy a story about one of the first times I went down there. I took my Girl Scouts to Natchitoches, where they filmed Steel Magnolias and plantation, road where Clementine Hunter, the artist, lived, and they had the African hut. And I can remember that I was driving down the old river road. And this was another time, I think, when I was a sales rep. I was all by myself driving down the river road because I love the plantation homes. And I saw a procession coming up ahead, and I slowed down. And as this hearse passed me, it was a funeral. This Black man turned to me, and it's like time froze. And I thought, is this real? Because I've seen this all before. And as all the people drove by me really slow and I'm almost to a dead stop, I felt like I was in a film. And I thought, did that really happen? Because it was like the biggest deja vu moment. As far as I know, I don't have any ancestors from Louisiana or anything, but it was what she said. Ooh, Mandy goes, you need to write that in a story. But it was really weird. I almost expected to see myself in a back seat, you know.
Hmm.
It was really strange. But I've had lots of things happen to me like that down in the quarter, and
Hmm.
things that I've seen. And it's to me, it's a writer's dream.
Oh yeah.
A little bit like Venice. You know, Venice is to me is another
Yes.
place that is like a writer's dream. So, how fortunate for you to live in these interesting places and get to go all these places. You know, when this opens up, we've got to get back out, Nola. We've got to do some things and step.
Absolutely. I'm down for the Tennessee Williams Festival. We got to do that for sure.
It is
For sure.
magical because I'm a theater person too. And they bring in all the actors from New York, and they've had everybody from Carol Baker to,
Mm.
oh gosh, the John Waters came one time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. John Barrett, you know, lots of really interesting authors. But anybody that's set in New Orleans should definitely, you need to get on the program and see if you could do a walking tour. That would be fun. Well, any last questions from anybody on anything to do with your new series and your Traveler series? And I'm really looking forward to the Traveler series. That sounds right up my Pirates Alley. Sorry for the bad pun. But anyway, thank you so much. And this is all being recorded. So as soon as this is over, it'll be downloading onto my Kathy L. Murphy channel on YouTube. You can share it. You can, you know, if you need a copy of the video to put up on your YouTube station or your website, you know, I'll help you any way I can. But we just want to get people to know all about your books and be ready for Crescent City Soul, which I love the title. That's a great title.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes me just want to go down and have some beignets and some
Mhm.
cafe au lait down in the French Market. So
That one has pirates.
yeah, do they still have that cereal bar down there? It was a little.
I don't think so.
It was a little eatery, and they carried every box of cereal that you could ever imagine in your life. And you can go in and you could order a bowl of your favorite cereal.
I would love that place. I haven't seen that place.
They had
We'll have to find it.
cereals that you have not seen since you were a kid. Of course, I always remembered Frosted Flakes and Captain Crunch and Cocoa Puffs and, you know, Lucky Charms. But they had some up in there that I couldn't believe it. And I thought, what a nostalgic thing to do, because how many of you grew up on box cereal? I lived on box cereal. I still.
That's what you did at the breakfast table. We didn't have phones, and so you had to read the back of the cereal box.
In the back of the cereal box and
Yep.
Sports Illustrated on Wheaties. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Nuts was my dad's favorite, but that was a cool place to go. But I can tell you some other great places too, and I'm sure you can too. So, okay, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way, Nola?
They can get in touch with me through the contact form on my website. My website is nolanash.com. Also, another place to hang out with me, which we have a lot of fun, is my Facebook group, which is Nola's Second Line. And we do a lot of fun things over there. Sometimes we just do goofy things. And then sometimes it's a great place for sneak peeks on things that are coming up. And I like to post a lot of kind of the snippets, like you were talking about, of books that I'm working on, works in progress, or just reviews that I've gotten. So those are good places. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Nola Nash Writes. So other places to find me there. There's lots of pictures of my puppy, Dudley, my little man, on my Instagram. So if you like cute dogs.
Love animals here at the Pulpwood Queens, but I'm going to leave you with one last music to listen to that is hot. I keep watching it over and over. John Baptiste.
Yes, I love it.
Oh my God, I keep watching it over and over, and it's down in the quarter, and the
Freedom
is it's just awesome. I love the music. I love the Island sound. And
He's on my Spotify list. He's one of my Spotify.
go to John Baptiste. It's got an E on the end, and watch Freedom. It's
Yes.
on the videos on Facebook, and it'll get you in the mood, besides the reggae, to read the Crescent City book.
Yes, I absolutely love John Baptiste. He does some great stuff. His family is in that video with him, as well as some local kids. It's fantastic.
The dancing. Oh my God. It's so me.
Great song, great video. He's awesome.
He's awesome. So, well, till next time, we'll see you tomorrow on Breathless Bubbles and Books.
Absolutely.
And, so far we've been having glitches with that blog site. So if you can get it up the night before, it helps, because I'm scrambling around and people will post it, and it's just, we don't know where they go. Mandy and I've had big conversations. Where do these blogs go when you post them and it doesn't show it on my end? I mean,
That's
she
so
was
weird.
reading to me what she was seeing on her page from Florida, and me, totally different things.
That's nuts. Well, I posted on Monday the trailer for Crescent City Moon,
Yep.
and tomorrow's post will be the trailer for Crescent City Sin.
Okay, movie time.
Movie time.
So you all have a wonderful new week. It's not the weekend yet, and as we say down in New Orleans, we say "Laissez le bon temps." Yeah, throw some beads, y'all.
Promise something this time.
We'll catch you next time, and see you tomorrow on Breathless Bubbles and Books. So, bye.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Bye bye.